Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
Even though it might not seem like it, it's been almost a year since Puma launched the Ultra Ultimate, the first major redesign to the Ultra line that I think most would agree didn't necessarily live up to the same performance standards as previous models. We now have a new version of the Ultra Ultimate bearing the exact same name, but with a new upper. Of course, begging the question, have they actually improved? Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the brand new 2023 edition Puma Ultra Ultimate. Football boots that maintain the same Ultra Weave and Power Tape construction to the upper. However, those two elements have been reformulated in such a way where it does feel significantly different. The sole plate and stud pattern does carry over, no changes there, and the retail price of $220 also remains the same. So with seemingly such subtle changes being made, you're probably wondering whether or not these actually improve at all over the Ultra Ultimate that they replace, and that's exactly what I want to talk about in this video. The good, the bad, and of course, how they stack up against the very competitive competition that is currently available in the speed boot category. So if you're interested in learning more, including how they fit and feel on feet, please stick around, and if you're interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick them up below the normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the first link down below. And as always, if you enjoy these brutally honest reviews, don't forget to drop a like on the video and make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2023. So we're going to start with what I would argue is the biggest surprise of the 2023 Ultra Ultimate, and that is how much they weigh, particularly in comparison to the previous version of the Ultra Ultimate that they replace. Both in the same size 9.5 US. We'll start with the old model, and you can see that they weigh in at what is a fairly lightweight 6.8 ounces, the equivalent of 192 grams. Change the scale back to ounces, and we'll throw on the Ultra Ultimate 2023 edition, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.4 ounces, the equivalent of 209 grams. For those doing the math at home, that's a 17 gram weight increase with the new Ultra Ultimate, which is really surprising given that these two boots use the exact same sole plate tooling. So all that extra weight must have come in the upper, which again is surprising given the fact that it's gone nearly translucent for this new generation. And that's not to say that the new Ultra Ultimate is a heavy pair of football boots, but it certainly is a step down from the model it replaces, which was already a step down from the Ultra that came before the Ultimate, which was exceptionally lightweight. So I'm not sure why Puma is trending in the wrong direction in terms of their speed boots getting heavier rather than lighter, but it is something to be aware of. And as far as top-end speed boots go, these are no longer near the lowest in terms of overall weight. As for the upper of the new Ultra Ultimate, you're going to find the same technologies found in the previous model in Power Tape as well as Ultra Weave. Ultra Weave being the textile base that you have to the material, and Power Tape in this situation being this rainbow reinforcement material that's kind of featured across the top of the foot, where according to Puma, the pattern itself is designed to mimic the tendons in your foot. Now, what I like about Power Tape this time around is it's actually noticeable. Power Tape, when it was implemented on the Ultra Ultimate, was just on the heel, and it sat on top of a hard internal plastic heel counter, which this football boot also has, and as you'd expect, you didn't feel it, it didn't do anything. It was simply a cosmetic element that Puma was touting as a performance feature. This time around, the synthetic material is kind of sandwiched in the middle layer of the Ultra Weave upper, where you have that textile base that is kind of the bottom layer. You can see inside the football boot, that textile is more or less exposed in the inner liner. Then you have your Power Tape sandwich in the middle, and then polyurethane on top. So it's effectively a 3-layer upper, very, very thin, borderline translucent. I think there's going to be some really cool colorways out of this particular construction process, but the material itself does feel a little bit more rigid, a little bit more plasticky, and arguably just stiffer than what was found on the previous Ultra, which is a good or a bad thing depending on personal preference. But what I will say is the reinforcement from the power tape is realistically going to determine whether or not you love or hate this football boot. And the reason why I say that is because the Ultra Weave base actually feels really good. It's super thin, very raw, but is maybe a little bit lacking in structure, which is where the power tape comes in to give you that locked-in responsive sensation, which you definitely get with the laces tied tight. The one thing that is a little bit unusual about this is it does add stiffness across the top of the foot when your foot bends, which isn't necessarily uncomfortable, but certainly doesn't have that soft sensation that you're going to get from other speed boots on the market that are of a similar thickness. The Mercurials definitely come to mind as having an upper that I think matches this in terms of responsiveness, but just feels more natural and comfortable against your foot. However, you'll also find that this power tape doesn't actually go to the base of the sole. There's a little space right here where you're left with this kind of unstructured Ultra Weave base on both the lateral and technically on the medial side, although I do think this Puma badge does act as a little bit of an extra reinforcement, where particularly right here, you can very clearly feel on the side of your foot where the power tape ends and where the Ultra Weave material just is left on its own. And it's not to the point where I think it's so uncomfortable that everyone's gonna have an issue in regards to blisters and general discomfort, but it is something that is surprisingly noticeable, where when the boots are tied tight, they feel really secure, really responsive. It's probably the most old school Mercurial-esque feeling football boot that I felt in quite some time. And with the modifications that they've made to the shape, I actually really like a lot about the feel of this upper. But from a comfort perspective, I can't say that it matches a lot of its competition. Again, the current Mercurial, I think, being the gold standard for this style of textile-based upper. In terms of feel for the ball though, super raw, super pingy, no extra padding whatsoever. If you get stepped on, it's gonna hurt like crazy just because there is no protection to be found here. And also they eliminated a lot of that extra texturing on the surface, where they just kind of left the raw texturing of the Ultra Weave material itself, which ultimately doesn't really provide a ton in the way of additional grip, but also is kind of what I think most people would expect from a super thin pair of football boots. So no major complaints from me there. The laces are maintained as kind of a central lacing system with a one-piece upper enclosure, the central part of the upper just being an elasticated knit material that actually sits very, very close to the top of your foot. It might not look like it, but this is a very low volume football boot in the midfoot area. So if you have really high arches, this might be a really difficult football boot for you to get on, and perhaps uncomfortable just based on how tight this actually feels, because the opening itself is quite small and this knit material doesn't have quite as much stretch as I personally think it should have. But again, the end result is a pair of football boots that really feels like it's squeezing your foot really, really closely, which again, may or may not be your thing. If you like that old school, super tight, super structured Mercurial sensation, I think you'll really like the feel of this upper. And again, from a responsiveness standpoint, this is easily the most responsive Puma Ultra model that they've made to date. Moving to the rear, the Ultra does maintain its low cut construction with a little bit of an extension tail, which is basically just there to help you with putting the boots on and taking them off. I really appreciate that. You have an internal plastic heel counter, which is relatively minimal. The heel liner itself is a microfiber material, hasn't really changed much from the previous model, and I just don't find to be particularly comfortable. All the padding is up high, and then kind of here at the base, you're basically just sitting directly against that internal plastic heel counter with just a little bit of microfiber. For me personally, I just find the heel to be uncomfortable. It was an issue for me with the previous Ultra. It's an issue for me on this one. It's not an issue for everybody based on feedback that I've heard from other people that had the previous Ultra Ultimate. So if you had those and found them really comfortable, there's no reason why these should be an issue for you, because the heel doesn't seem to have changed at all. But for me personally, I just don't find the heel liner or the amount of padding, or perhaps even the positioning of the padding, to be all that great for me personally. Blisters in the heel are something that I do experience with this football boot. And then as far as the insole is concerned, it's fully removable, and you can see that it has their nano grip liner, which kind of just has this soft silicone texture to it that really does a nice job of gripping your sock. I really like this lining material. And then it's made from a single layer of foam with this perforated foam insert. Ultimately very thin, very lightweight, but it does get the job done. As for the base of the latest Ultra, the speed plate does carry over from the previous model. It's still a dual density plastic material where you can see there's a different material here versus what's surrounding the edges as well as running through the midfoot. The end result being a sole plate that feels relatively low profile and that it doesn't have a lot of thickness to it, but at the same time it has decent flexibility. I would say in terms of that responsive sensation, this is definitely the least responsive of the big three as far as speed boot sole plates go. Nike and Adidas definitely offer something that has a little bit more of that kind of stiffer spring back type sensation, but this definitely doesn't feel bad. I actually really like the sole plate itself. And then as far as the stud pattern is concerned, it's pretty straightforward as far as what you're gonna find on a lot of speed boots, very comparable to what we've seen in recent years on the Adidas X line, in that they're kind of like these three-sided studs, but you also have some chevron studs, but ultimately in shapes that are not as aggressive as what you're going to find from something, say, a Nike Mercurial or even a New Balance Furon at this point. So if you like that little bit of freedom to twist and pivot, you get more from this than you would from a pair of Mercs. But overall, if you're just looking for aggressive traction, there's not a ton to dislike about this layout. On feet, like I've mentioned a couple times in this video, the new Ultra Ultimate really does have a little bit of that old school Mercurial fit and feel to it. The structure of the upper and the overall shaping of the football boot is definitely different from the previous Ultra Ultimate and really does give you that squeezing your foot super tight responsive sensation that you're either going to love or hate, let's be real, but a lot of people really like that super tight Mercurial feel. It's part of the reason why that line of football boots has stood the test of time. As far as little gripes that I have with the upper, you can definitely feel the transition point here on the medial side of the forefoot where the power tape ends. It's just a little bit abrasive or a little bit uncomfortable, but again, that's something that's going to vary from person to person depending on the specific shape of your feet. And then for me, again, the heel. It was the same issue that I had with the original Ultra Ultimate. There's just no padding in the spot where my heel sits so tightly against that internal plastic heel counter. It's just one of those things that's super uncomfortable. No amount of break-in time fixes it. It's just not the right pair of football boots for my foot shape. But again, everyone's gonna have a little bit of a different experience depending on the specific shape of your feet. But for me, I definitely don't find them to be the most comfortable pair of football boots, particularly high-end ones where I think the comfort out of the box should be a lot better. These are definitely not at the top of the out-of-the-box comfort list. From a width perspective, they definitely don't have a ton of width to them, and the lack of volume through the midfoot I don't think makes this a good option for wide feet at all, so definitely something to be aware of. They are a very tight-fitting football boot with minimal stretch on offer from the upper. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing them in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you are looking to get a pair for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, the 2023 Ultra Ultimate is a bit of a confusing one for me in that I'm really impressed with the objective performance of this football boot. It's super responsive. It is incredible in terms of giving you that raw barefoot feel for the ball. I think the sole plate and stud pattern is top notch, and even at $220, while not cheap, it is less expensive than a lot of their main competition. There definitely are gripes to be had in regards to the weight going up from the previous model, but overall, I do think it's a nice improvement despite on paper looking like the exact same pair of football boots. Here's the catch, however. I just don't find them comfortable, and that was the same issue that I had with the previous Ultra Ultimate. It remains to be true with the latest model. The heel in particular just does not feel good, and that alone is enough for me to say that this is not a pair of football boots that I would personally want to wear. Of course, your mileage may vary when it comes to fit and overall comfort, but when compared to the competition, even though the competition might be a little bit more expensive, Nike, Adidas, New Balance, and even Mizuno all offer speed boots that I think perform to the same standard and ultimately feel a lot more comfortable.